In August 1983, I visited revolutionary Grenada as I was working on a film about science and technology. I was impressed with the enthusiasm of the people and visited a number of projects, including a woman's cooperative producing jams and jellies from local produce. I had dinner one night with Jackie Kreft, the Minister of Education, who spoke about the country's many achievements. 2 months later, she was dead, brutally killed alongside Prime Minister Maurice Bishop and his colleagues. This led to an American invasion and marked the end of a unique Caribbean experiment.
Well, my name is Minister Bishop, the mother. Well, must I say 3 children? It's only 2 now, eh? What should I say?
Grenada, we were told, was a friendly island paradise for tourism. Well, it wasn't. It was a Soviet-Cuban colony being readied as a major military bastion to export terror and undermine democracy. We got there just in time.
The Grenada Revolution undoubtedly, in the entire history of such events, has proven to be the most humanitarian revolution of all. That is a statement of fact that cannot be challenged.
Our duty is to continue to build our Grenada Revolution and ensure that we, as one Grenada people, small as we are, will forge that wider, meaningful link and will ensure the unity of our people.
There was this loud explosion, and when I opened my eyes, one of the young women who came up to the ops room while we were there, I saw her body on the floor, and it was opened up in almost divided in half, and I thought to myself that we were all going to die.
Oh no, they shouldn't kill Bishop, so oh no, they shouldn't kill Bishop. He was a righteous man.
They shouldn't kill Bishop.
He was a loving man.
They shouldn't kill Bishop.
He was a true man.
They shouldn't kill Bishop.
He was a righteous man.
They shouldn't kill Bishop.
Oh no.
You cannot understand what happened on October 19th unless you understand every one of the major mistakes that every one of us in the leadership, all of us, made from the very beginning of the process. It is only understanding the totality that could explain the ghastliness, the catastrophe that was October 19th.
How did it start? Well, you know that Eric Matthew Gary had been the Prime Minister of Grenada for a long time. And when you're in power for a long time, you find corruption starting to come in. People were dissatisfied with the regime. There were new needs in society which were not being met. It was a depressed economy. Because of the dissatisfaction in the society, there were 2 movements. One based in St. David's with Unison Whiteman, called the Jewel Movement, and one led by Maurice Bishop called Movement MAP. And the 2 of them merged and they took the name the New Jewel. You also found a certain amount of repression, people who would not stay within certain parameters.
Curie was an arrogant man. He was a man, he didn't like opposition. And anybody that opposed him tend to be eradicated from existence in that by police brutality, secret police.
One of the actions of Gary was in fact to unleash, right, police brutality on his political opponents. The New Jewel movement, of course, suffered a lot from that. So as early as 1973, when we were in fact making inroads into the population and carrying our message across to the nation, Gary in fact, attacked us on November 18, 1973 in the town of Grenville. We were in the process of in fact organizing small business people and other people to engage in a national strike against the government. But when we got into St. Andrews on that particular Sunday to in fact carry out the final phase of the mobilization, we were in fact confronted by hundreds of secret police. Hundreds of secret police who in fact eventually launched a brutal attack on us and almost in fact wiped out the leadership of the New Jewel movement, right? Maurice Bishop, myself, Eunice Whiteman were brutally beaten. Now that of course sparked off national protests by all sectors of the population, right, throughout Grenada. And that in fact, that protest went on for several months, right? Way into the next year, from November 1973 right up to January 21st, when Maurice Bishop's father in fact was killed at that time. So this was, in a sense, setting a stage for a new kind of struggle for us and the party, right? In fact, as early as then, we said, well, listen, we are going to participate in the open democratic process, but at the same time, we should be prepared for advancing the struggle along different lines. And that was one of the reasons why we thought it was important, right, for us to have a more than one strategy for assuming state power.
It was also the time when Marxist-Leninist ideology was becoming popular. And so when the two met together, dissatisfaction with the way Mr. Gary did things, and also the time was ripe and the society was ripe for some kind of move towards getting people to support a Marxist-Leninist ideology, and as it turned out, a regime.
As a young person, I had, like all things, had enough of the Gary regime. I had been observant of it for a number of years, and I had known Gary personally, had had some interaction with him. He was a very charming man. But I thought by the time I was a young man and he had gotten past independence and to 79, he had become an embarrassment to Grenada in many respects.
You heard about the womanizing, you heard about the obia. I think the revolution did a good job of painting Gary as this evil. At some point, in my opinion, I think he would have gotten complacent as the leader. That much. He also had his group of persons that did some brutal things, of course, to persons who opposed, you know. But the tyrant that Gary was made out to be by the revolution, I am not so certain that all of it is true.
It really started with the nurses' strike. Nurses wanted more pay, government felt they couldn't meet it. Maurice Bishop took up their cause. He organized new forms of protest, which is marching through the streets and so on. That is how the activism really started.
People, in fact, were calling for something to happen. They were calling for change, right? When we went around the country, right, people were saying, I mean, they just cannot take it anymore. What are you going to be doing? We have to, in fact, take some steps to bring the situation under control.
Cutlass, stones and sticks had a role too. Eyes bloodshot, filled with fear. That in uncertain but determined to chase, to eliminate. But bravery, courage, the old manhood in quest. No blood must flow, but bullets must fire.
The preparation was actually done by the party itself, because the party realized that we had to struggle on all fronts. And therefore, from time to time, the party had been preparing a military section in the party to take care of any incident which may occur, because the Gary dictatorship was relying solely on force to keep the people in check, and we thought that at some time we would have to use some force to free the people.
The plan was that Gary was going to leave the country on Monday midday, and the instructions that were being left behind was that we should be liquidated. That left us in a position where we had to choose whether to sit and wait for liquidation or whether we should move on the offensive. What we did was that from our positions in hiding, the decision was taken that the next morning we should, at this point in the name of the people, move to seize power.
The wind stood still, the bell never sung. Screeching tires, slamming doors, and explosion piercing the stillness.
One early morning, they started out by taking the barracks and the radio station, and then it moved out. It was actually a revolution by radio, because they took the radio station and gave orders from the radio station to people in the country what to do, what not to do.
The actual fighting in True Blue did not last for longer than half an hour.
Armed with guns, dirty and shot, rusty, greasy, sticking bullets.
After the attack on True Blue, I then had to take men to attack the radio station. And on my way to attack the radio station, I saw Comrade Bishop and Comrade Whiteman and Comrade Lewis and so moving to the radio station.
Government of the criminal dictator Eric M. Gary has been overthrown.
When we call on the radio and ask the people to come out and support the radio station, well, people just leave their jobs, walk off their jobs and come to get armed.
The entire army has surrendered, and all the arms have been captured. A revolutionary government has been formed.
We listened to most of it, and I remember them calling for the women to come and make sandwiches. I said, well, why not women taking a more active part than the usual traditional, but that was just me.
The new revolutionary government calls on all people to defend the revolution. All religious rights and freedoms are now restored.
Calling for this person to go and take over this police station and that person to take over that police station. So without the radio, one wonders what would have happened.
The people's rights to life and private property are hereby restored. The new revolutionary government calls on all the people to defend the revolution.
Gary is a wanted man. Idi Amin is a wanted man. Shah of Iran, fighting hard to survive. He too is wanted, dead or alive.
Small as our country is, small as our resources are, small as our aspirations might be as a people, we recognize what Comrade Fidel Castro has said more than once of our country, that what we have here is a big revolution in a small country.
What we inherited on the 13th of March, 1979 was a tremendous legacy of economic and technological backwardness in the country. There was total economic stagnation. We had a really serious unemployment problem, 50% nationally, among women about 70%. Infrastructural development had virtually completely stopped. In some houses, well, 60% of all homes had no pipe-borne water. About the same percentage had no electricity. You had that kind of situation, and that's really what we had to combat right from the word go.
Let them understand that this is a people's revolution. And therefore, when they talk of soldiers, do not just look to our revolutionary comrades in green, whether the Revolutionary Army or the militia, but what they should do is look to all of the people before them, because those people make the revolution.
And last March the 13th, when Maurice Bishop, Bernard Ford, and Comrade Radix and Comrade Strawn, and all of you won your victory, that was a victory for the people of the world.
Ustedes alcanzaron la victoria definitiva.
You attained your decisive victory
el 13 de marzo de 1979.
On March the 13th, 1979.
Y nosotros,
and we,
que en esos momentos combatíamos,
who at that time were still fighting,
en la ofensiva final que derrotaría la dictadura de Somoza,
in the final offensive that was going to defeat Somoza's dictatorship,
nos inspiramos con la victoria de ustedes.
We're inspired by your victory.
Nos sentimos más fuertes.
We felt stronger.
Cuando recibimos en nuestro país al compañero Bishop, estábamos recibiendo al pueblo de Grenada.
We were welcoming the Grenadian people.
When Maurice Bishop took over this country, he had massive support. And had he called elections then, he would have been legitimately in government for the next 5 years.
Tuesday, March 1979 is a day every West Indian will bear in mind.
The Grenada Revolution has nonetheless continued to go forward and to make progress. At a time when even the big, powerful, industrialized nations were growing backwards last year, we grew forward by 5.5%. The revolution in Grenada, starting from a base from Gary of 49% unemployment, coming from that base, when we did a census last year, April 1982, the unemployment rate had dropped from 49% to down to 14.2%.
I was in my 20s, and I could have identified with the kind of political philosophy that was at the time being put forward. And Maurice articulated that very well. He came across to me very sincere, as someone who has come from a privileged family, but who, having returned from the UK as a lawyer, dedicated himself to really helping the less fortunate.
What would you say are some of the main achievements of the revolution?
Oh, there's quite a few. One, the education of people. The self-esteem of people, especially women. And people came out of their shell. We always used to say that the women who never held up half of the sky held it up then. So I would say an empowerment of women and empowerment of all the people, the courage people had, the conviction that they were a Grenadian. Before we used to be ashamed to be a Grenadian.
There is no other country in the English-speaking Caribbean where on any night, in any part of their country, you could find a permanent secretary trade and a budget officer in the Ministry of Finance, together with ministers of government who come forward and report to the people and present themselves for scrutiny. No other country.
Previously, we had elections once every 5 years. Now with the new democracy, the new grassroots democracy, where the masses comes in the organizations and meet on a weekly or monthly basis and discuss the problem in various parts of the country. through the mass organization as different, where only 15 men used to discuss the problems of the people before.
Comrades are in favor of the rules as they are presented, and comrades vote using the credential cards, right? Comrades are against. Any against, they show by raise of hand using the credential cards.
With the new democracy, the grassroots democracy, everybody will discuss the problems of the country through the mass organizations, in the various groups in the villages, and then on the parish level and nationally.
One of the nice things about the early days of the revolution is that because of the popular support, they could get a lot of community support for projects. So there was a lot of community rebuilding of roads, a lot of communities who came together to repair and paint schools, or even to build community structures, and so on.
During those years, 79 to 83, we had what we called the National Women's Organization, NWO. And this organization had small cells or groups in various parishes and even in villages. So we organized women to educate them in all areas, politically, economically, and otherwise.
Not a brother, but a sister working on the That's a tremendous step forward for women. The movement of our women is part of the movement of all our people to extend the rights and the power of all our people in our society.
It doesn't matter if it's women's rally or not, if it's men's rally. It's just the same thing, the same struggle.
People call it, old people say, young people say, I say, Pastor say, NJS say, ERA say, we say, for justice, equality, equal opportunity, ever more brilliant say. Liberation at last. Long live the struggles of the working class. With patriotism and dedication, we rise every day to meet the morning sun. Forward never, backward never is upright. If we can be free now, then we rather die. This struggle is long, hard and we'll feel the pain, but believe and will win. The people call it, old people say, young people say, I say, the Rastaman say, the PRA say, the NJM say, the United for justice, equality, equal opportunity, forever more brilliant say.
The last year of Gary, 1978, the capital investment program was $8 million. The first year of the revolution, that figure was more than doubled. It went to $16 million. The second year of the revolution, it was doubled again. It went to $39.9 million. And by this time, the experts were saying that is impossible. You don't have the resources, you don't have the management, you don't have enough tractors, you don't have enough trucks, you don't have enough engineers. You can't possibly do it. You all were only lucky in 1979 when you doubled Gary own. And you're only lucky in 1980 again when you double your own. And then when we went in 1981 and we double it again, they say, well, we don't know if it's luck, but something is wrong. You all can't do that again. And then last year in 1982, it went up to over 100 million. And then we gave them the secret. We told them that in a revolution, things operate differently in the normal situation.
Long live friendship, solidarity, and cooperation among the people of the world. Long live the struggle for
once you opposed the revolution, you became an enemy. Once you said that they did something wrong, you became an enemy and you would go to prison.
I got admitted to the bar in October of 1978. I was presented to the bar by Maurice Bishop, and I started getting involved in the human rights type of practice. And as time goes by, there was a view from some quarters that I was too taken up with human rights. And in July 1981, we decided to publish a newspaper. Leslie Pierre was spearheading a move to get a newspaper going, because at the time, the Torchlight was closed. There was no independent newspaper in Grenada. The PRG, the People's Revolutionary Government, passed a law stating that to get involved in the newspaper business, there must be a company with at least 26 shareholders. They refer to the previous law as being bourgeois, because any individual could have set up a newspaper. So Leslie Pierre went around and tried to identify persons, got about 26 of us, we established a newspaper. And after the second publication, the newspaper was closed down. Leslie Pierre, Lloyd Noel, and myself, we were detained.
Too many people were believing the propaganda statements, and there was no means of people knowing the truth, not only in respect of the paper, but in respect of what was happening in the country. Because they had programmed or conditioned the people of Grenada into some sort of support for them through their own illegal paper prior to the coup in 1979. And they knew the power of the press. So they wanted to smother any effort at a free press, because it wasn't in their interest, of course, to have the truth be told about what was happening in the country.
It is important for us to start by saying that all revolutions involve dislocation. Anyone who does not admit that is dishonest.
I was never asked a single question, although I had been brought in for questioning. There was no attempt to lay a charge against me. There was not even a farcical trial as they had with some other people against whom they alleged that they had people who were alleged to have committed offenses.
Our course was to detain those people who were threats to national security. And it has to be very, very clearly understood that in any situation of a revolution, there must be counter-revolution for a period. And therefore, a necessary period of dislocation must result. The choice is between firing squad, pretended shootout in the hills, as so many people like to do, pretended accidents, or in fact detention. And that was the course that we chose.
Had the Grenadian community resisted what was going on, our history would have been quite different. But people were not prepared to resist. Once you're in authority and you have force, everybody just decided to go along.
No one is ever interfered with for what he says. No one is ever interfered with for what he writes. In fact, today, criticism is deeper than ever in the society in a constructive way. But our people also understand that the first law of the revolution is that a revolution must survive, must consolidate, so more benefits can come to them.
We were anti. That was a word very common then.
Why would they think you're anti?
Well, we didn't belong to what you call it, the type of person who had joined their party.
I mean, during that period, I had friends who actually, when they see me, they drift in because they realize they label me a counter-revolutionary to be associated with me. They feel they're going to be detained. Because once you was hostile or critical of the revolution, they would detain you, and people really didn't want to stand up and defend their rights and to insist on respect for human rights in Grenada at the time.
In terms of the conditions that people are kept under in the prisons, maximum conditions are allowed in terms of medical facilities, in terms of visits, in terms of food, in terms of clothing, in terms of reading material and such like. Regular and periodic reviews are made, and whenever it is deemed that it is reasonably safe to allow any of these people to re-enter society, then that decision is taken.
A lot of people were in prison during the PRG period.
Yes.
Some people say 1,000, some people say more.
There's more than 1,000.
More, some people say 3,000. And they say Maurice must have improved this.
I'll tell you this. That was one of the things I spoke to him of. Because I visited the prisons a few times. And the things that the people were telling me wasn't coinciding with what the guys' reports were. And I said to him, you know something, Maurice? I think those guys are making up some of these stories. They're doing this, and I think they're harming the revolution more than helping. And he said, what? I said, I don't think these people there, most of them supported you. So why would they go against you? And I don't think it's true. And I was correct. They were sabotaging. There was something wrong. And he realized eventually that something was happening. But a lot of people were in prison, and that should not have been.
And you may ask the question then, how can you sit in government and be part of a government that had political detainees? And that is a fact. And that's something I had to deal with throughout the years.
It was terrible. Bishop himself was polite. If you met him, he was polite. But it was not a nice period.
Like you come out of control, the whole that judge was. You feel you're still in the movies, like you stick up the West Indies. No, we can't. We can't. Joshima's ready, can take a walk. Down with your bass, down in the Caribbean. But Georgie can't sell out like Uncle Tom. So you can keep your 300 and your empty.
June 19, 1980 was another occasion for counter-revolutionary destabilization. A bomb was placed where thousands of Grenadian patriots had gathered. This bomb was placed and intended to eliminate and to make a mass murder of the Grenadian leadership. It did not do that, but 3 women were murdered. And this was yet another occasion when we knew that the CIA was involved in the general destabilization of the country.
If we do not act promptly and decisively in defense of freedom, new Cubas will arise from the ruins of today's conflicts. Let our friends and our adversaries understand that we will do whatever is prudent and necessary to ensure the peace and security of the Caribbean area.
The real reason for all of this hostility is because some perceive that what is happening in Grenada can lay the basis for a new socio-economic and political path of development.
The Cubans, with Soviet financing and backing, are in the process of building an airfield with a 10,000-foot runway. Grenada doesn't even have an air force. Who is it intended for?
We had help from several different countries. It is not the Cubans alone. As a matter of fact, Paul Gaddafi is dead today. And Grenada government still owes the Libyan government $5 million that was given for the airport project. We got money from Finland. The actual dredging of the bay came from an American company. So it was an international airport, internationally financed. We got money from Venezuela in the form of fuel.
What we have to realize is that even though Reagan and them want to see us with this international airport, but they really know that this airport has mass support from among the people, right? And I feel that if they may want to know if this airport is good for us or not, should come among the people and find out what the people think about this international airport, because we know it's a benefit for us.
I think most people appreciate that all education is development. Even during the construction of the airport, we are going to be benefiting not just the money that's being spent to construct the airport, but the skills that are being acquired at present by Grenadian working on the airport. And when we get a highly skilled group of Grenadians who had been trained at present in the airport, this will lead to further economic development of the country when the airport is completed, because they can go into other construction.
A military base has certain features that must be present. One, you must have a parallel taxiway to the strip. So any planes that are coming into the runway can get off the runway as fast as possible. You must have underground fuel storage facilities, because if you haven't got fuel, the planes can't fly. And there are quite a few other things that had to be present at Point Celine for it to be a military strip. These are not there, and even today as we speak, they're not there. There were no military personnel or advisors, military advisors at the airport.
That secret report made this point, that Grenada is different to Cuba and Nicaragua. And the Grenada Revolution is in one sense even worse, I'm using their language, than the Cuban and Nicaraguan revolutions, because the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada speaks English and therefore can communicate directly to the people of the United States.
Is there a big difference between the reality here and what Reagan has said?
Yeah. Oh, it's ridiculous. I mean, you can see here that it's a place for tourists to come. I mean, there's an American medical school about 100 yards away from the airport, and they told us that there's going to be Soviet bases here.
Yeah, you know, he had suggested this is a Cuban or Soviet military base.
Well, they tell us a lot of things that aren't true in the United States.
But I want to tell you what that same report also said, and said that also made us very dangerous. And that is that the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada are predominantly black. They said that 95% of our population is black, and they had a correct statistic. And if we have 95% of predominantly African origin in our country, then we can have a dangerous appeal to 30 million black people in the United States.
The people started to get disillusioned and they stopped giving this support. And by 1983, everything had run down. They couldn't get volunteers for the literacy program. They could it was very, very difficult to get any kind of community support for anything that was going.
Your actions are so wicked, you make war in the Middle East. And then you send in your men, Camp David, every day, talking peace. Like you come out of control, the whole I charge your world. You feel you're still in the movies, like you stick up the West Indies. No, Reagan, no, Reagan. George Shima's ready, can take a one.
Down with your best, down in the Caribbean.
But Georgie can't sell out like Uncle Tom. So you can keep your 300 and your anti-million.
Money is not the answer to this question.
I said to him once, I don't think Bernard and those guys, I think they're working against you. And he thought that I was harsh and said, no, maybe I wasn't seeing things the way others were seeing. But I knew for sure that they were working against him. I saw through some of them and I always kept saying to him, I don't think those guys are genuine. They're not genuine. And in the end, he told me I was right.
A number of people have said that ideologically and with respect to Marxism and Leninism, there was no difference between Code and Bishop? What do you say to this?
No, I don't think so. I think Maurice was more a socialist. And that's one of the things I always believed that the others were. They were definitely Marxists. I don't think he would have bring the country to know Marxism. I think he was a socialist, and most of his ideas, that's why, in the end, that happened, because he didn't believe in most of the things that they believed in, especially Bernard.
I have to tell you this. I probably wrote the book on being naive, because it's funny. I can use the excuse that I was not a member of the party, so that's why I didn't know, and which is probably true. But I did not realize that we had those kind of festering problems within the very bowels of the revolution until it actually broke for me in September of 1983. It's embarrassing to say, as a member of government, I sat in cabinet, but I did not sense that there were any issues at all.
In Grenada, there were two political parties in the PRG. There was the New Jewel movement, and there was Oral. Oral was Bernard Codes. And most of the young people that came out on Bernard Codes' side were members of Oral. But Maurice didn't, I mean, he knew it existed, but he never thought they would do what they did.
Well, I think there are possibly three fundamental reasons why the revolution failed. The first of them is the blind personal ambition for power and leadership by Bernard Codes. His attempt to, at any cost, at some point, become leader, not recognizing the reality that nobody wanted him to be leader.
I got the sense at the time that the idea of joint leadership was put forward for the sole purpose of removing Maurice Bishop from most of the decision-making processes and to promote other people as the central figure and planners of the revolution.
The second reason was a growing ultra-left idealist position of a significant part of the Central Committee, which ended up with them taking and supporting the most ultra-left position. That is the question of joint leadership that was completely leftist in its conception.
Joint leadership of the party meant joint leadership of the party and not the state apparatus, right? It had nothing to do with who the Prime Minister of the country. It had nothing to do with who was in charge of the armed forces of the country. It had nothing to do with any state positions at all. This is important for us to understand. And therefore, it was felt that our two most talented leaders, right, i.e. Maurice Bishop and Bernard Codes, should share the leadership of the party in order to ensure that the party work was done properly and the party was properly streamlined, because if that is done, it will have an impact on the entire revolutionary process.
And the minister said to me, and this was Kendrick Radix, he came to me and said to me, this is happening, and I could not believe it. And he said, you call Jackie Creff now. I remember very well sitting in an office in the Ministry of Education, and she was having coffee and smoking like a chimney and emotional about it, and telling me that there was this move afoot to remove Maurice from the leadership, that what Kendrick told me is in fact correct. She did indicate to me that she was very fearful for Maurice's life.
And a third factor was that over the years, if there is one weakness that Maurice had, was that he did not establish sufficient controls on the party and was not sufficiently involved in the building of the party. And the party and the military were integrated. There was no difference between the party and the leadership of the military. So that once one got control of the party, you automatically had control of the army.
Watch out, Nevis, St. Kitts and Anguilla, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and Dominica. Another pillar crumble, down comes the prison wall. Another leader tumble, and another tyrant will fall. Coming up, a brand new revolution.
Maurice was naive. He should have been a priest rather than a politician. Because, you know, very early when Phyllis Code was made Minister of Information and Bernard was Minister of Finance, Deputy Prime Minister, Maurice came to my home once and I said to him, you know, Maurice, I don't think what's happening here is right. You're giving them too much power within the system. And his answer to me is, these people will never do anything.
The meeting was held, the trap was laid, the timing was right, like a festering wound, like a seething volcano. Our very hope, our aspiration, our belief and dignity trembled.
Brothers and sisters, last night a delegation from the Central Committee of the New Jewel Movement made a formal offer to Comrade Maurice Bishop for him to continue as Prime Minister, to continue as a member of the party, and to work closely with the New Jewel Movement Central Committee in running the country. Comrade Bishop's position was that he would consider the offer, but was not willing to talk last night.
My husband left home this morning on the 19th of October and never returned up to now. So this is a very sad day. 28 years now he left home and have not returned.
So what actually happened that day?
I got up that morning and I went to my job as I normally do, which was at the School of Nursing.
There was something in the air. There was something that you felt heavy.
When I got into the classroom, the students had written messages on the blackboard, on the board saying, no Prime Minister, no class, no Bishop, no revolution, no, I can't remember all of them, but they did write up messages on the board. And the classroom was in disarray. Students were not in the mood for classes, they were not in the mood for anything.
Well, we started jumping and making little beats with different words in it, like saying no bishop, no school, right? And then the principal, that's Mr. Baptiste, he could not have controlled us. So he just left us and we all floored the street.
They said they were going into town to march because the demonstrations were coming from the country. The seamen and waterfront people were marching, and the workers at one of the electrical company was marching, and students from the country area like St. Andrews and so came into town to march. And someone came up to me at the office and said to me that Minister Unison Whiteman had fainted in the market square, that is down in St. George's, and they needed somebody to come to see what was happening.
We heard noise in the market, and when we looked down, we saw people gathering into the market square.
By the time I got there, they had removed him from the market square. But I continued to march with the crowd up to Mount Welldale. That's where Maurice lived.
What happened that day is that the people of Grenada, over 30,000 of them, hearing that Maurice Bishop was under house arrest for well over 5 days, decided to march on to Maurice Bishop's home, his official residence, where he was held under house arrest, and released him.
This morning at 9:30, a crowd led by Unison Whiteman, Vincent Noel, and 2 businessmen stormed Maurice Bishop's home.
You have people in the streets like having one poem, like a river, you know, just flowing onto Bishop's residence to release him.
Well, it was about 99% of the population up there. They fired shots in the air. Some of the people ran, but most of them stayed. Then it had armored cars in front of the gate. They could not have controlled the whole population, so they just had to leave the gate open. They just pushed down the gate. It had people who get damaged, school children, you know, from the massive crowd. Their legs got broken and so on.
In keeping with the position of the party and the army during the revolution, never to fire on the people. Lieutenant Colonel Lane told me that he ordered that soldiers to fire in the air.
Fire shots there and tell them, you know, stop. Crowd backed off. They kind of, some people scattered down back the hill. And when they realized that, you know, shots are fired in the air, they see, you know, the comment was, hey, you know, they wouldn't fire on us, they shoot in the air.
These guys joking, man. They fire in the air, they fire at nobody.
And that kind of emboldened them, and they, you know, basically they went and take over. They ran through the whole place.
Do you know what happened when the masses came and released it?
Well, what happened, as I was told by the sister who worked in the house, is that the people came up.
Who is that?
Teresa is the one who worked in the house.
Yes.
And she said he was in the bathroom, just about to go to the bathroom, and she went in and called him. So he came out with a towel wrapped around him. Mm-hmm. And then when he came out, by the time he had come out onto the veranda, people had already gathered, were already bust through the gates and were getting into the yard. So he ran back inside and put on just a shorts on a jersey or something like that. And the people came in, and after he went out into the yard and greeted them. And then they snatched him and took him away.
Maurice came out and he was very weak. He could not have walked. So they lifted him up and put him into a vehicle.
They came out of the building with Maurice and Jackie at the time. They placed Maurice on a truck. Just before they went into the truck, I remember giving him a hug. And he said something like, "I'm so tired."
Yes, he was only in a short pants, half naked in a short pants. And then when he came out of the house, a few people take off the shirt to give him to cover up his body. People start shouting, "We get we leader. That's we leader, we get we leader."
While they were taking him away, basically the elements in the crowd started to say that we're coming back for all you. But that the security guarding the areas decided that that was a dangerous place to be, and that they, you know, men should go to a more secure location. And, you know, so Fort Frederick was determined as the more secure location.
Within a few minutes, Mount Welldale was quiet as a lamb. 2 minutes ago, it was militancy. It was rowdy, it was noisy. Some of us who were there were advised by our personal security to leave the compound and go to Fort Frederick for our own personal safety, because they couldn't determine what will happen.
And the truck left. So in my mind, I thought they were either going to the market square or somewhere.
He must have changed 2 or 3 vehicles, and then went on to the Fort Rupert.
Suddenly, it was brought to our attention that a section of that crowd that had just left Mount Welldale were heading for the military headquarters of the People's Revolutionary Army. So that, of course, was a cause for great concern. Clearly, entering the military compound at that time changed the entire character of what was taking place.
When they arrived at the fort, soldiers there prepared to fire on people who tried to enter the fort. And Chris Stroud, he was a senior officer, tells him, "No, put down your weapon, no fire." And he goes to try to talk to Maurice. You know, and say, "Maurice, you can come on the fort, of course you can, but you can't bring people on the fort." I mean, that is against, it's gazetted that no civilian is supposed to cross that barrier, you know. And while this discussion, people just surge forward, you know, people sense indecisiveness, you know, after experiencing what happened at Mount Welldale, and they surge forward, and then they take over the fort, you know, people just streaming all about.
While I was sitting in my office, one of the students attached to the School of Nursing came to me and said to me, "Sister, the comrade leader asked for you to come to the fort." So By then they were up at the fort, so I said, okay. So I went up to the fort.
He would have gone up there for basically 3 reasons. One was to try to get some security so as to move on to the market square to address the crowd. Secondly was to make some telephone communications with the outside world. And thirdly was to have the possibility to do a broadcast by radio through the telephone.
He wanted to go onto the fort because of some telephone calls which he wanted to make. Because there was a lot of propaganda going on which suggested that Cuba was supporting that other clique who were trying to oust Maurice Bishop. And that was, of course, totally untrue. And Maurice Bishop wanted to clear Cuba's name.
When I got there, he said to me, he needed someone to go to Grentel so that they can open up the communication services again, because apparently the communication system was shut down. To open up the communication services to let the world know that he's released and all of that. He then said to me, some of the guys who were with him under house arrest didn't have anything to drink or eat for the day or something like that, and whether I had anything in the office. So I said, yes, I have a kettle and I'm going to go down and get some crackers and stuff like that.
And I went with Jackie's mother, and we were taking some food for them.
Yeah.
And well, we went into this room. I think it was a conference room of some sort, I don't know. And there were a lot of people in there already. Just people who had come to support.
And Maurice and Jackie were
in there. Yes, yeah. Maurice and Jackie were in there. And a number of, there were some nurses, there were some young people from in my area, there were a lot of women, you know, and there were some soldiers. Supporters. Well, as far as we knew, because you see what happened in the end, there were some soldiers in there, and I still don't know what they were about. I think the majority of them were supportive.
I went down to my office, I got a kettle, I took some cups with a bottle with coffee and a big bottle of cream and so on, and I went up. I plugged the kettle on, and in my brazen little self, I was just making cups of coffee and distributing. And I remember giving him the first cup of coffee, and he said to me, no, give somebody else. And there were people milling in and around the room where we were on the fort. I didn't know at the time it was the ops room, because I am not a military person. I just knew we were in this room. I didn't see any ammunition or anything that made me believe it was a room where only military people must be. And for me, my hero on that day was a young soldier by the name of George Cherubim. We fondly refer to him as Podgy.
The morning began about this time. Instead of people heading for work, you saw pockets of demonstrations. You could have stayed up there and see them at the GBSS compound. In the secondary schools, the students who were not going to classes, you could see them assembling. Coming from the town there, of course, it's different now in terms of things. But finally, when we all here thought that the demonstration was going to the market square, all of a sudden you could have stayed up here. The soldiers were saying, Lieutenant Cherubin, they're coming up, they're coming up here. And you could have heard the chants, you could have heard the movements coming. By the time I came out of the window, the very first glimpse I got is of a Maurice Bishop I have never seen before. Shorts and slippers coming up, almost being helped up the hill. My first impression was to come out of the office room, come down. Of course, that time there were no masses there, just a few party comrades who were coming down to the fort for safety, I guess, from early in the morning. I came down at about midway on the hill. I braced Maurice. I was in tears that time. His first words to me was, Podgy, we want no violence, we want no bloodshed. This is a peaceful process. These things still ring out in my ear almost every time I think of the occasion.
When we went up on the Fort Frederick, you see the crowd entering the fort, taking over, and then reports that they took over the armory, right? The armed civilians, the soldiers, they were put under arrest, right? The officers there like Redhead and Stroud and Prime and Bogman and so on, so detained in the operations room, right? And that the crowd had occupied the operations room of the army, one of the most sensitive, you know, locations in the country in terms of the security and all of that. So that was the information that was coming in. I think efforts were made by Colonel Lane to contact those responsible on the fort. Eventually they got through to a Unison white man, and the remark was that basically report to the next police station. Right? So it was clear, a clear line had been drawn from the evidence that was coming through, because there was also reports that they were moving on to other camps. They got what you call, they got sweet, and moving on to other camps to take them over. So it was clear from any military standpoint that would have been, you know, not just a threat to national security, but civil war. Civil war was imminent.
Maurice came up with the masses behind him, and they made their way into the upstream.
And we sat there and having conversation, making the coffee and so on. Then I remembered some students came into the room, and they were real jubilant, and they were hugging him and they were kissing him. One student was from St. Joseph's Convent, St. Andrews. And then I remembered other people coming in with baskets of stuff. It was turning into be almost like a picnic.
Colonel Lane called me, myself, Raymond Nelson, and Conrad Mills got orders to go and retake the fort and to use, you know, whatever force is necessary.
And then I remembered the wife of Minister Maurice Bishop and some other people from St. Andrews came. And there were some of the guys from the military department in the room, but they were going in and out. I can't remember everybody, but I remember Mr. Prime and a couple other people being in the room with us.
Lieutenant Parks, myself, Lieutenant Cherubin, Lieutenant Hippolyte, Captain Stroud, and Captain Redden. We were all in the upstream, and Lieutenant Prime. Maurice was making a number of statements that these guys up there want to kill people, they want to kill people. A lot of chaos.
My mission was to take the top square. Mayor's mission was to take the bottom part of the square, because that was his unit basically. And Raymond Nelson's mission was to secure the bottom road and so on, to make sure nobody leave with weapons and documents and things like that.
And I remember sitting there making the cup of coffee, and Jackie, that's Jacqueline Kraft, came and she sat next to me. But she was terrified, she was shaking, and I said, "What's wrong with you now?" And she said to me, "And I'm so scared something terrible is going to happen." And I said, "The worst is over. We got you all out of there, the worst is over." And she said, "No, I'm not comfortable in here, I'm not comfortable in here."
3 armored personnel carriers, and their mission was to go and retake the fort, restore order, and chase the people off the compound.
So when we left, we weren't basically in a highly combative state, going and shoot and them kind of things. So, but we didn't think about facing an armed enemy, to be honest. We thought about the crowd and, you know, getting them, clearing them and things like that.
Soldiers were humiliated, you know. There were 2 soldiers were trampled on. One is Leonie Mitchell, she's still alive. She was stamped on, stripped to her underwear. Her panties and bra was, you know, stamped on by you know, the demonstration, you know. And soldiers took off their clothes and crying, and they humiliated and left to go. Several other officers were put under arrest, you know, and so on. And
when we arrived at the bottom of the square, the bottom of the hill, gunfire opened. And our warrant officer, Mason, fell off of the first armored car, right on the road, and right there, and well, you could see that he died on the spot. He just collapsed and fall down like that. His rifle pitched one way, and helmet pitched one way, and things like that.
Warrant officer Mason, he died right at the entrance of the fort, and the second person was the person who commanded the unit, Conrad Mears, Officer Conrad Mears, was shot in his groin and died after. 2 other soldiers died. There were 4 soldiers who died. Every soldier on the first armored personnel carrier was shot, except the driver. All the 6 were shot.
So we basically opened fire. The unit from the first armored car let go. I think they released a rocket-propelled grenade, and to create a shock effect, and fire started.
The armored cars opened fire immediately upon arrival. They did not say one word of warning. They did not use a loudspeaker.
There was this loud explosion. An explosion that was deafening to my ear. And I don't know what happened, but I remember the room got very foggy, full of smoke.
But we were lying flat on the ground, and the trajectory of the weapon, fortunately, was upwards. So nobody inside was seriously injured or injured by weapon, because bullets were going up while we lie down flat.
It was meant to kill all of us in the room. Everybody in the room. Yes, including Maurice and Jack, and anybody else who's so foolish as to go up there to say they're supporting them.
Yes.
And when I opened my eyes, one of the young women who came up to the ops room while we were there, who worked at one of the companies in St. George's, I saw her body on the floor, and it was opened up in almost divided in half. And I can remember the fatty tissue and the bloody thing just trickling out. And I thought to myself that we were all going to die. The next thing I remembered was I can feel this warm thing coming down all over me, and I looked up, and at the back of my head there was an air conditioning unit that used to be in that place, but apparently whatever came into the room took that out with it, and there seemed to be something like the remains of somebody dropping on me. And then there was continuous pounding and firing going on. I remembered Maurice vividly saying, "They have turned the guns on the people." Oh my God. The matron at our hospital who was in the room with us, and I now use that as my moment of smiling when I thank God for keeping me alive. She started to pray, and all the other women in the room were praying. They were saying the Lord's Prayer. They were saying all kinds of prayers. And I remember the matron saying, "You have said where 2 or 3 are gathered together, you shall be in their midst. Stop the hands of the slaughterers, Jesus." And after she would have said it the 3rd time, and the gun firing didn't stop, she screamed, "Jesus, you're deaf or what? Stop the hands of the slaughterers." So I use that as my comic relief moment.
Every single member of the unit was standing on the outside of the armored car, which means that the BTR, even though they were going to restore order, right, they were not going there for war. Because if you are going there for war, each soldier will be buried inside the armored personnel carrier. Because I think it was felt that once the people see the armored cars coming, they will in fact submit. When the unit arrived at the foot of Fort Rupert, before they actually got to the top, the now armed civilians, right, immediately started to fire upon them. That is what happened. And soldiers were injured in the process, and some soldiers were killed instantly.
It wasn't an arms base here, so there were very little arms here. There was no big set of arms here, and they didn't come with much arms either, the demonstrators.
There were no defenders of the fort. There were no defense system and mechanism on the fort to defend Bishop and them.
So you weren't getting guns to arm the masses?
No, there was no guns to arm the masses. There were no guns to arm the masses there.
So these were guns
just
to protect?
2, 3 rifles just to make sure that he was personal protection.
The idea that Bishop was arming the crowd
is
not
totally
so.
ludicrous. This is absolutely a lie.
Could you put that in a statement form?
Well, the idea that Bishop was arming is a lie. It never happened.
That's what his opponents.
You are hearing it from me for the first time. I am the man involved, and I could tell you that.
But let's fast forward. We are inside there, and what you heard, what I heard, is a single, what I would call a rocket launcher propel. And then immediately after that, automatic fire.
And the armor car going up, and we following them. And as they reach to the thing, we hear boom, everybody scatter.
What the other side, for want of a different term, heard was one single shot, and they are saying that's a shot that killed Connie Mayes, and then the troops reacted by shooting.
Conrad Mayes, who led the 3-member armored personnel carrier unit, was shot, right? And as a result of that, the soldiers had to return fire. Because again, the soldiers were told before they leave that if fired upon, because you never can tell what could happen in them situations, if fired upon, you will have the right to return fire.
What I heard was I would call it a rocket launcher, and you could have seen the effect of it. It propelled a window there, and it left one woman who I later learned to be Avis Ferguson with her buttocks literally blown off, gasping for breath inside the ops room. Gasping for breath inside the ops room.
And this led to a shootout. A battle ensued.
And they just started shooting off at the people. Fire blazing and people just falling down. Yeah, it was real terrible.
It was just noise, chaos. There were people praying, there were people shouting, and Bogman was telling them, keep quiet, keep quiet. If they hear us, they would know we're here. They out to liquidate us. Keep quiet so they will believe all of us dead. I mean, it was just bullet, 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 bloodshed. At one point, it became even worse because you could have recognized that they had advanced to the top and were now shooting from the top of the building. So this time, the trajectory of the bullets was downwards. And it was at this point that we began to become even more frightened inside here. Okay, you were seeing literally the walls, some place in the walls stripping up. It was miraculous that more people didn't die inside here. There was a young Belma child, she eventually died. Convent uniform, came down and braced Maurice and said, Maurice, we demonstrate for you for this, and we free you, and we come down, and she was so energetic.
Gemma Belma was talking to me and my husband.
The chair was sitting on inside here. I volunteered it to her.
The door was shut and Gemma was next to me. When the bullets start coming in the wall,
Maurice told us to get down.
Gemma was hit at the back of her head and fell down.
She got hit on that said chair.
And when I rolled on the ground, I saw the buttocks of Avis Ferguson, everything, her intestine, everything was out on the ground.
The same girl who went up there with me, she only went because I was going. You know, myself and Mrs. Craft were going. She absorbed it. She got hit by it. She got killed, and this is what, you know, prevented the rest of us from getting killed.
I was hit in this hip, and I got a lot of cuts on my arm. The bullets grazed me, but I ended up with 2 bullets, which I still have.
And every time around this time of the year, including up to last night, I keep picturing, what if I did not give her that chair to sit on, and I remain sitting on it?
I say I did. I mean, I say I'm close to death. And I was saying, I wonder how it's going to feel. And, you know, I was sure I was dead because there were shots hitting on either side. A girl who was right next to me got hit. She died afterwards. I had to carry her out. They had blown away a whole side of her head and so everybody expected to die. Most of us were very calm. Yeah. Very, very, very calm. There was one woman who was praying aloud. But everybody else was very quiet, just doing the sensible thing, crawling towards a piece of furniture to sort of protect herself and so on.
By the time my wife, who was a trainee nurse at the time, my fiancée, she was then, came in looking for her father, Brad Bullen, and begged me, please, Porgy, let's look for Daddy and get out of this place. We don't need to be there. I mean, there was no way I could have seen myself deserting at that point in time. So somehow we stayed around. While those bullets were firing inside there, we both were close together. Engaged to be married. We held each other's hands. And were mumbling things to the effect that we will go together, we will die together. It was difficult to imagine how you're coming out of there alive. That must have continued for about, and I'm saying this now in retrospect because I wasn't counting time, about 20, 30 minutes of, I mean, literal barrage of fire hitting that building. And there was a sort of miraculous lull in the shooting. And as if Maurice was waiting and timing this lull, and he said, someone needs to go out and surrender.
After the first fusillade by the armored cars, is it true that Maurice Bishop, Jackie Kreft, Bain, Eunice and Whiteman surrendered?
They surrendered. They called on a soldier who were inside to go out and surrender. None of them were injured in any way except Vincent Noel, who was shot in his leg. but was not killed.
I remember Podgy saying, look, I am going to go out there. I don't know what else to do. He said to Maurice, comrade leader, I am going to just go out there and say something, and I don't know what's going to happen.
Bugman, my fellow lieutenant, who was always my sort of commander, said, Podgy, there would have to be two of us. There were two doors there. This one and that one. I was closer to the door there. There were sandbags in front there. There were people standing there. And he said he would take this door, which he was closer to, and I would take the next door. I happened to have come out before his own. By that time, I was half naked. Before coming out, I deliberately rubbed myself in the Belmar child blood because she wasn't thing, to make it look like if I was injured. Took off my shirt, first of all, took off my badge of ranks. I was done, took off my shirt.
He pushed his head through and he said, Langain. I don't know who Langain is. That was just a name. He said, Langain, there are a lot of injured people in here. Hold your fire. And a voice came back. I don't know if it was the voice of Langain, but a voice came back saying, put your fucking guns, put your
fucking hands in the air.
And Podgy said, there are no guns in here. And the guy said the same thing. I say, put your fucking guns down and come out with your hands in the air. Podgy then looked back into the room and he says, I'm going to go and I'm going to go out, and if anything happens, then that's it. And that young man put his hands up in the air and walked out of that door.
And came out and said, we surrender. While I'm coming out, you're hearing Maurice saying, we need to allow the women and the
children come first. Those were the last words I heard from him.
I was going back into the room to tell people, but by that time they must have heard, because people, the nurses, the Aunt Peters, the matron of the hospital, my wife, they were just flooding to come out.
And quite naturally, some of the guys who were in the room at the time were picking up people who were injured. And I remember them picking up that young school child who died eventually from St. Joseph's Convent, the same one that came into the room hugging the Prime Minister then. And they were all exiting the room.
So Gemma was next to me in a pool of blood on the floor. So I said to her mom was inside there as well. So I said to her mother, we can't leave her. So, well, I was wearing pants, her mother was wearing skirts, so I asked her if she had on a half slip. And she said yes, and I said, take it out, let me band her head. And there was a soldier near to me, and I asked him if he could creep up to come and band her head. And he came up and band her head, and I had her head. I went out with her mother, and a nurse from the hospital.
I tried to get up, but I realized I was having difficulty standing. By then, I had not realized I had 6 broken ribs. I had burns all down this side of my leg. I had shrapnel all over, and a piece of a bullet still in one of my arms. I got up from the floor simply because I had an adrenaline rush. Something said to me, if you don't get up, you're going to die. So I got up from the floor. I put my hands up over my head. I had to lift this hand because from whatever went in here, it had my hand numb. So I had this hand up.
We carried her out.
I saw some people struggling to come out with her. So I went back up, helping them. We come down to the step here.
I was the person in front, holding her head. And we went down the stairs. There were people lying on the ground. I saw Vincent Noel there. I passed over him.
There were bodies lying on the ground. One of them was a very dear friend of mine. Vincent Noel, that was his name. He was a trade unionist. I saw other people on the ground that I knew, but he was alive, and he said to me, Anne, help me. And it was the most painful moment I can ever remember because I could have done absolutely nothing. I stepped over him with my hands up and I said, I have to get out here alive.
Subsequently, he was taken out by soldiers and finished off right behind the building in which they were holed up at first.
Jacqueline Kreff was the person holding on to me at the back. So we were walking out. Now, when you go out into the veranda, there are some steps. And when I looked, there was a Land Rover burning at the bottom of the steps. So to get out, you have to jump. And I stood there and I jumped. And when I landed on the ground, I looked at Jackie and I said, jump. Her eyes were big and I said, jump. And she jumped.
I always credit to Aunt Peters. I'm not sure it was so. Somebody said, Podgy, they will want you. You need to hide yourself. So there was this human structure coming down, about 6 people holding this child, sort of so. And I positioned myself beneath her, and I'm coming down so now. So her body is literally on my back, and I'm coming down, and we're going down the hill. I recognize one soldier by face, all because something must have dropped from Colonel Meck. That's how we call him. A private soldier, but we call him Colonel Meck. And we took that Belmont child into the hospital, and it was there that I seek refuge for the balance of the day.
And we were the last 2 people out there about women going down the fort to the exit. We cleared the first part. And as we were going down the second part, I heard a voice say, "Look, fucking Jacqueline Creve, don't let her pass." And they took her from me, and I continued walking. I think one of the reasons why I wasn't held back is that, one, I had changed into nursing uniform, and I was so dirty that maybe I was not easily recognized. I walked into the school, into the yard, and I went straight into the hospital. And the nurses and the doctors took me, brought me up into the operating theater, washed me off properly, and brought me down to an office downstairs and hid me in the office. So I stayed in the office.
And there's a soldier by the name of Crispin, but the other name they call him Bogman. I can't use the bad word. He tell me to lie down there. And I lie down in a trench. He tell me, I know him, me and him from the same area. He tell me to lie down in the trench. They have sandbags. That's right up the foot there. And I lie down in the drain. And he stand up. And people running. He didn't do me anything. He was guarding me because he know me. And people running up and down, up and down. And when everything kind of cool down, he tell me try and make it home. So I jump over the big wall. The big wall coming down where they used to take out teeth. So I come down the long step.
People were saying they're massacring people. That's all you were hearing. So we, who were a few of us on the top, ran up to the top of the fort. And when we got to the top, there was nowhere else to go. People ran all over. I just jumped right over the fort. This was all there to be done. Because my whole emotions was about escape.
I just led my unit straight up and to take over the top square, the topper levels, right? Because that was my mission. When I came, so I did that, kind of briefly set up some posts and so on, and came back because our mission was basically to arrest all the leaders that was there, arrest them.
Well, everybody got up to leave, but the soldiers went around putting their hands on people. You ain't going nowhere, you ain't going nowhere. And they grabbed these people that they wanted and they took them a different way, and the rest of us, you know, went out.
They all came down to the ground. Mrs. Craig was there too, Jacqueline's mother. They all came down and my husband driver went and tell him, let's go. But a soldier went up and said, you could go, but you stay, you stay, you stay, you stay. And he pointed to all of them and said, don't move.
And what happened to
Maurice Bishop and the others were taken up to the top square of the Fort Rupert.
We did have a lot of problem in convincing some workers that they should participate in the class.
So what actually happened that day?
He was murdered.
And Jacqueline had a little boy. That was her son. And my son was fat and chubby. She used to ask me how he fat like that. I said, let's make custard porridge. We used to sit down and chat. She was a grassroots woman. Nice flat afro and nice afro dresses like that she used to wear. Nice, intelligent woman.
My father, he was my best friend. He was my everything.
Baby, they were too good. They loved the people. They gave all that they had for the people of Grenada.
He was a handsome man. He used to always fully bed. He had nice ship block, nice brown skin, nice. The color was nice, like spice color. Handsome, good-looking man. God take his time and make Maurice.
Maurice Bishop was one who, quite honestly, changed my lifestyle over the last few years, because I saw for the first time in Maurice Bishop a Grenadian who was prepared to try to bring all forces together, regardless of the political views, regardless of the strata, to try to take a nationalistic approach in developing Grenada, and most important, to improve the quality of life for the majority of Grenadians.
He was not a petty man, malicious, spiteful, conspiratorial, or anything like that. He was a whole person. In fact, his greatest strength, perhaps, was his greatest weakness, because he made no enemies. And in that sort of atmosphere, deviousness and treachery, I think, must have overcome him at that time.
Our duty is to continue the struggle against imperialism. Our duty is to continue to build our Grenada Revolution and ensure that we, as one Grenada people, small as we are, will forge that wider, meaningful link and will ensure the unity of our people. Long live the Grenada Revolution! All power and glory to our people, forward ever, forward ever, forward ever.
They were placed against a wall at Fort Rupert and mowed down.
Maurice Bishop was asked to turn his back, and so were the others asked to, but he refused. He said he'd look it straight in the eye. So he was shot looking at them straight in the eye. Jacqueline Kreff, I understand, had asked, begun to ask for some relief and asked to be shown some mercy, and she was machine gunned also in that process. The other three people who were put into the execution line, who were not in the building with Maurice Bishop, but who were captured at the top end of the fort, were Evelyn Bullen, Evelyn Maitland, and Keith Halin.
They were also killed on the same occasion.
They were actually killed at that same time, and they were in the execution line.
Did you line them up?
No, I wouldn't say we lined them up. They were basically on the top square, where we were bringing them to the prison that we had up there. They were basically on the way to the top square. Those that we were gathering, we brought them up on the top square.
So you machine gunned them?
Well, I had an automatic rifle. Other men had different weapons. I didn't think we were necessarily having, we wanted this or that weapon. It's what men had at the time, right? So that would have been the situation that unfolded.
Who actually participated in the shooting, in the firing squad?
I know there were five people.
Who were they?
Abdullah, whose correct name is Callistus Bernard, Lester Redhead, then and three privates. Andy Mitchell, Inculcate is the fourth one, that's a nickname. And I don't recall immediately the name of the fifth one, but there's five of them.
There was talk that fingers were cut off during the execution. People were half alive and they were machine gunned again. Did these sort of things happen?
Well, that was again, it might sound kind of crazy, but this was just total make-up evidence. This evidence was used to try to trap Lester Redhead because they had no evidence against him. So they claim that basically he cut off Maurice Bishop's finger and he cut off his neck, tried to use him as not just a bandit, but like a war criminal. So to be quite frank with you, I could tell you with utmost certainty that that evidence was made up by those who really wanted him they wanted him to hang.
What did Maurice and Jackie Kreft and the others, what did they say?
Well, Maurice was pretty calm. I think Maurice was smoking at one time, smoking a cigarette or something like that. And he looked basically, I think he had looked kind of spaced out. I think a couple of the others tried to make certain points and things like that, but there was arguing with, you know, going on and so on. But I don't think there wasn't any sort of kind of speeches or any kind of thing like that, because the soldiers were cussing as well, and, you know, accusing them of what they're doing and for, you know, what happened and things like that. So there was a certain back and forth between the soldiers and some of them that was there. But certainly with Maurice Bishop, he didn't have anything to say.
People say that he was asked to turn his back and he said, no, I refuse to do that. I'm going to face my people.
No, I'm not that. That certainly didn't happen in my presence. That was just people talking in anything.
And Jackie Kreft?
Well, there is talk that they say she's pregnant and things like that. Some of that came out in the court case, that she put up her hand and said she was pregnant and things like that. I don't know. I was present there for the whole time, and certainly that didn't occur. That was just to put additional sensationalism to the whole thing, and there was a mood in the whole situation there that you find whenever soldiers get cornered and shot at and killed, right? That happened in all parts of the world. That kind of revenge, if you want to put it, or whatever, comes up as a riding factor, yeah, right? And things go on. So that is the basis, the psychological condition that was existing that propelled that kind of situation. You know, so that would be kind of what happened basically on the 19th.
So, but what did you actually do?
Well, we basically opened fire on them.
They are now talking among themselves about the way in which the execution took place. As a matter of fact, Abdullah was telling that particular person that when the execution was over, that Fitzroy Bain was not dead. He had thrown himself down early before the firing started, and so he was not hit. And among the dead bodies, he was lying there, and then attempted to get up when he thought everybody had left, and Abdullah saw him and machine gun him down.
One of you must have made a decision to do this. Who was responsible for that?
Well, I take responsibility for that. As I said from the beginning, I took responsibility for what happened when the chaos started.
I have very clear and firm evidence that it was the Central Committee that took that decision. They were all up at Fort Frederick at the time.
There was a gap between the shootings down below. There was a lull. They put up their hands. It doesn't seem to be a spontaneous act.
Well, what I say is that there was a lull in the sense that when Mears and so on was brought to the hospital, there was that break in the law. I'm not saying that it wasn't spontaneous in the sense that we went there and we just started shooting. But there was this sense that there was this rupture, this psychological break when the news came. That after this lull, I'm saying yes, obviously they had that, because we went up there, we started to gather people and take them here, there, and everywhere.
Things were so chaotic, and the rage of the soldiers had reached a certain peak that anything could have happened there then.
It was planned. An order was given. Maybe if you ask Christopher, maybe he mightn't say it. But Christopher Stroud told the court that he was given an order from the CC. And they were given an order because some of the soldiers who did not want to do it, and they would tell you, Calisius Bernard told them that is an order from CC. And if they didn't do it, they would have been killed. So they had to do it. The guys that were the gun shooters. So it is nothing that it was just happened.
And you're saying you received no orders from head office?
No, I didn't receive any orders at all.
The reason why there must have been an order to carry out those executions is that time elapsed. Time elapsed, quite some time elapsed before the actual execution took place. So they had time to round up, they had time to line up, they had time to consult, and they had time to carry out the actions. And therefore, that kind of development and that kind of timeline and that kind of chain of action, there must have been something at the top of it to say, go ahead.
They were executed after the army, after the Central Committee was checked again for a second time.
How do you know
the Central
this?
Committee, I know, was checked, and it was said that if the Central Committee agrees that a red flare will be shot.
Agrees to what?
To the execution.
Of course, lots of people don't accept that story. They feel that some major decision had to be taken by people of my level for that to happen, and so forth. But that did not take place, right?
That red flare was shot into the air. These people, the Maurice Bishop and Jackie Kreff were then machine gunned, and it was said that once that has been completed, that the signal from Fort Rupert to Fort Frederick could be that a white flare would be shot into the air.
Given the way things unfolded, and given the nature of things on Fort Rupert on that day, I don't think arresting anybody would have been uppermost in anybody's mind.
So who was responsible for the killings?
Well, that is a very difficult question to answer. I know that I have to bear some responsibility for that, right? Not that I'm saying that I ordered any killing, but I have to bear responsibility for that as one of the leaders in the process, right? Regardless of how it was done or what, I have to take responsibility for that too.
But don't you think you should have first waited to get some orders?
Well, there was a breakdown internally to what was happening on the fort. There was a breakdown because I had instructions to basically take care of the, basically bring order to the thing, bring order, and that was the primary motive and the primary thing that was happening. When that situation happened, when that psychological breakdown took place, right, all that in a sense sort of kind of went out the window.
So the soldiers acted under orders?
Well, I will ask you the question where you think a private in any army could put a prime minister up against a wall and shoot him.
I saw the white flare myself because I was in the prison at the time.
Where did you get the information that you've just given with respect to that system of signaling and delivery of instructions?
From people who were in the Fort Frederick compound, soldiers who were in the Fort Frederick compound. One of the drivers of the armored car gave me a detail as to Lane's instructions to them.
With respect to?
With respect to going on to Fort Rupert and recapturing the fort, as it was said. And
what about with respect to the murder of Bishop?
With respect to the murder of Bishop, people who were close to the Central Committee building said that that was the sign that that was agreed on, and that red flare would be fired into the air, signaling affirmative.
I am, right, a former leader of the process. I was in the thick of things, right? I was part of all the decisions that were taken, whether it was in a collective meeting or whether it was through consultation, and so forth. Some of the decisions were incorrect, and so forth, and I have to bear that cross. It is very easy to say, there would have been meetings, but meetings in a formal sense, no. Right? What you could have had in this situation, and what in fact existed, would have been consultation, right? Right? Yes, we're going to be bringing a unit from Camp Federal to Fort Frederick and deploying them there. Yes, we're going to be doing this and so forth. Yes, we are in fact going to be sending a a unit of Fort Rupert to in fact restore order. And decision of that sort, right? One didn't have to sit down in a meeting to discuss that. And people in fact had to take certain responsibilities to see how best they can arrest the situation and bring things back to normalcy.
Somebody made a decision to execute Maurice and the others.
Well, somebody or it could be somebody's. In other words, I mean, who is a somebody? Do I have the answer? No.
We lost the battle with the demagogues, and with the greed and lust, with the hate and scorn, and boom, we executed the revolutionary man. And that was the end of March 13th, 1979. Revolution. Revolution.
People's Revolutionary Armed Forces have, as of 3 p.m. today, established a revolutionary military council,
which will form the government of the country until normality is restored. Let it be clearly understood that the revolutionary armed forces will govern with absolute strictness. Anyone who seeks to demonstrate or disturb the peace will be shot.
Anyone who seeks to demonstrate or disturb the peace will be shot.
An all-day and all-night curfew will be established for the next 4 days from now until next Monday, 6 o'clock. No one is to leave their houses. Anyone violating this curfew will be shot on sight. All schools are closed and all workplaces except for the essential services until further notice.
Grenadians in the region could no longer talk revolution because of Bernard Cod and Hudson Austin, the warlord. They turned a dream into a nightmare before we could celebrate the 5th year of a revolution this world was looking upon. They orchestrated a crucifixion that led to a Yankee invasion, betrayed the nation and turned back the revolution.
It has now been confirmed that a U.S. naval task force headed for Grenada and should be in the Caribbean waters close to Grenada by tomorrow at the latest. One report gave the number of U.S. ships involved in the task force as 15 and the number of Marines on the ships as 1,900. The reason given for the dispatch of the American warships is that the students at the St. George's University School of Medicine and other Americans in Grenada may need to be evacuated. However, the Revolutionary Military Council has dismissed the reason as an excuse for a U.S. invasion of Grenada.
I always felt as long as there was a Prime Minister, something was possible, being government was possible. And so I was left without a government. thought, you know, I would have to ask for help, and by Monday, I think the word went to the right quarters that I would need and accept help.
Grenada was without a government, its only authority exercised by a self-proclaimed band of military men. There were then about 1,000 of our citizens on Grenada, 800 of them students in St. George's University Medical School. Concerned that they'd be harmed or held as hostages, I ordered a flotilla of ships, then on its way to Lebanon with Marines, part of our regular rotation program, to circle south on a course that would put them somewhere in the vicinity of Grenada.
We have taken this decisive action for 3 reasons. First, and of overriding importance, to protect innocent lives, including up to 1,000 Americans whose personal safety is, of course, my paramount concern. Second, to forestall further chaos. And third, to assist in the restoration of conditions of law and order and of governmental institutions to the island of Grenada.
The Governor General sent word to us. He was unable to send us a letter. Sent word to us that he wanted us to intervene, to come in and do something to bring normalcy back to what was happening in the country.
Critics are saying that you're being used in a way as a pawn to encourage U.S. influence in the region.
That's quite wrong. I mean, if we'd had more time, we'd have asked even more people to assist us in this. But it does take time, and we saw the need for speed in this thing. And it was certainly our request to the Americans. The Americans did not approach us in the matter.
The invitation for participation in a military operation came from the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. It came to us, it came to the United States, it came to Barbados. We didn't issue any formal invitation. It wasn't in our position to do so to the United States. But of course, on a verbal basis, we let it be known that we would be participating if the United States would participate.
Last weekend, I was awakened in the early morning hours and told that 6 members of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, joined by Jamaica and Barbados, had sent an urgent request that we join them in a military operation to restore order and democracy to Grenada.
Did it bother you at all that Jamaica was on sort of the short end of the vote at the United Nations General Assembly when over 100 nations, members of the UN, criticized the action in Grenada as a violation of the UN Charter?
It doesn't distress me to learn that everyone is against us except the people.
Your actions are so wicked, you make war in the Middle East. And then you send in your men, Camp David, every day, talking peace. Like you come out of control, the whole of Georgia world. You feel you're still in the movies, like you stick up the West Indies. No, Reagan, no, Reagan. Joshima's ready, can take a one. Down with your best, down in the Caribbean.
And the first Rangers were out, jumping over the barricaded, uncompleted 10,000-foot strip. At once, Cuban ground fire shifted to the Rangers as they steered their chutes toward the airfield. Immediately, MAC AC-130 Spectre gunships moved in to suppress the heavy defensive fire and silence the anti-aircraft guns. The Cubans drew closer to the airstrip, now skirting the Rangers' landing site in armored personnel carriers. Once again, the gunships moved in, surgically eliminating enemy defenses with minimal damage to non-combatant life and property. By 0750, only hours after the rescue operation had begun, the Marines encountered very little resistance and secured Pearl's airport. Soon at Point Salinas, the Rangers had taken hundreds of Cubans into custody and had secured the island's only other airfield.
It isn't nutmeg that's at stake in the Caribbean and Central America. It is the United States national security.
Shortly after their arrival on Grenada, U.S. troops began to uncover evidence that as many as 700 Cubans had been on the island. Many of them were there to construct the landing strip at Point Salinas. Everywhere, from locations along the end of the runway to inside the workers' barracks, signs pointed to the Cuban presence and to Soviet influence. By the time troops completed their search, they had found 6 warehouses north of Point Salinas airfield, fully stocked with both Cuban and Russian arms and ammunition. Then, with about 700 of these Cubans in the custody of U.S. and multinational peacekeeping forces, Mac made the arrangements to shuttle both them and the captured arms and ammunition off the island. As the 82nd continued to move from Polk to Grenada, the first group of American medical students geared up to move out.
Oh, one hell of a lot of thanks to these guys who went in and got you out.
You supported the invasion? You thought it was a good thing? What was your views of the invasion?
I thought it was a good thing. I thought it was the only way out.
Yeah, totally justified. I mean, when the intervention took place, there was no government in Grenada. It was a state of chaos. I mean, nothing in terms of administration. The people were under house arrest for days. You know, I mean, after this mass execution, and you know, there was no real legitimate authority. So you know, something had to really begin to get back to some form of normalcy. You know, something had to be done.
Somewhere it said, you said it was a bloody good job. Was it?
Yes, it was. And the people of Grenada, supported it. But who matters? Where is the sovereignty? The sovereignty lies with the people.
We knew as soon as Bishop was executed that it was going to be hard for us to get off. We wanted off a week ago and couldn't. I've been trying to get the baby off for a week and couldn't get her off the island, especially with the curfew. We were very thankful when we heard the United States was going to intervene. We knew we were stuck. I looked at my baby and thought that maybe she wouldn't ever get off that island. I didn't want to raise her in a country that was going to be taken over by military.
Most people couldn't, I don't think anybody accepted that this could ever have happened in Grenada. What happened in October the 19th. So a lot of people that would have supported Maurice would have said perhaps this might have been the best thing that could happen in Grenada, the Americans coming here.
I must say that I was not against it. Because my view about this is when a man is drowning and he gets someone to help him to not to drown, then he ought to be thankful for it. That's my own personal view. I think there were views expressed about international law that I could understand where people coming from. I could intellectualize it. But I wasn't into intellectualization at the time or the period when all people were under a curfew and people had guns all over them and people felt extremely fearful of their own survival. I wanted to see people rescued. So one could call it intervention, invasion. I really don't want to. I don't wish to get into debate. I don't think it's here and there for me. I think what's important is that the people were given an opportunity to have a system of governance of where they can feel like once again they can choose the government of their choice and that guns will not become the order of the day to decide whether you're in power or not. And I think that's fundamentally where I separate from those who want to characterize in terms of the international legal principles involved. While I understand their position, I don't think I would have supported them then.
I will fly, as I have done since 1984, every year after the 19th of October, an American flag on my business place. And I am now the only business in Grenada that still does it. The rest of the chickens have gone home because there was a time after that that every business place in Grenada flew the flag and the Grenada flag. I have only one flagpole, so therefore, with regret, I can't fly the Grenada flag. But I will again this year fly the U.S. flag to show my eternal appreciation, and again, I make no apologies about it.
The president was greeted by more than 40,000 cheering Grenadians who turned out to hear him speak.
President of the United States of America.
The people of the United States sent our young men, our courageous soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen to protect our own and to save a neighbor in distress. 19 of our sons died here. Many were wounded. Our brave lads risked all because they believe in those ideals that we've spoken about today: justice, freedom, and opportunity. Let us pledge that their sacrifice was not made in vain.
No podemos decir que el dolor se comparte, el dolor se multiplica. Millones de cubanos lloramos hoy junto a los seres queridos de las víctimas del abominable crimen. Y cuando un pueblo enérgico y viril llora, la injusticia tiembla. Patria o muerte, venceremos. Hoy venimos de nuevo para despedir a 24 cubanos que en Granada murieron como consecuencia de las acciones militares de Estados Unidos.
El ataque a Maduro fue el miércoles por la mañana. Cuando hice ahí que me hirieron, tiré los tiros que me quedaban en el fusil mío, tiré los tiros de los compañeros muertos, pero no sé para dónde tiraba. Sé que tiraba, pero no sé para dónde.
A lot of people are still very upset about the bodies, that there's been no closure on that.
Well, yeah, that is something that is unfortunate, but what could you know, one doesn't know. We haven't gotten a clear explanation, but because of the circumstances, during that period, it was a period of chaos. There was no real authority in Grenada. This is why nobody could say anything about the bodies. From October 19 to October 25th, you know, nobody knew what was going on. I mean, people were under house arrest, and, you know, there's military force and what was really in control. There's speculation that bodies were burnt, you know, by military people. A lot of speculation. There's speculation that the United States authorities may have gone with the bodies, but there's no clear evidence as to exactly what happened to those bodies.
The bodies, sir? You know anything about the bodies, where they are, where they got to?
The evidence is overwhelming. In fact, Nadia Bishop, in a radio program, I think GBN Radio, as far back as about 15 years ago, after 2 years of exhaustive investigation, said that the Americans have the bodies.
The Americans
even Terry Marichaud, no friend of mine, has made that clear more than once.
Couldn't your government make advances, overtures to the American government and request very strongly that whatever evidence they have, they turn over to you?
Well, I have no difficulty doing that, but I know there are some persons who have been, the church, I think the Conference of Churches, they're trying to look into that, but I don't know if anything could be obtained at this stage now. Yeah.
Because there's the stories about the Americans and they had body bags.
Well, yeah, again, it was all speculation. There's also speculation that the bodies were burnt in down in Calavini. So yeah.
So we decided that look, we're going to burn the bodies as a condition for preserving it. So when the bodies were brought down to Calavini, right, and that with the intention of that was the basic motive behind it, because as you know, a lot of whole parts of money, dollars, and things were discovered on the bodies, remains of the bodies. That all came out in evidence, rings and money and all of that, and it was basically recognizable, right? When the invasion came, I brought the American soldiers there and showed them exactly everything with the bodies, and that was it. I was in prison after that.
The Jamaican captain also took me to Calavini, to the grave where my father and others were burnt. We saw in that deep pit, it was not a complete grave, they were burnt tires. It was still smoking, even after all these days. And there were no bodies in it. They also brought me rings and watches and pendants that they found on the bodies of the grave, of those who were in that grave. And I was able to identify my father's ring, which was a gold ring with a diamond on it, and his pendant with his name on it. I was able, it was just bent from bullet or so. I was able to identify his pendant, his bracelet, and his chain. My father, Evelyn Brad Bullen, was murdered. He was my best friend. He was my everything. I've never seen him. No, I haven't got the remains of his body up to now. I don't know where he's buried, but I'm still hoping that I will be able to put his remains to rest one day.
The Americans were here on the 19th of October. So what happened to the bodies between the 19th of October and the 27th of October? You know, and a lot of people in Grenada today that know, because they're cleaning up at the fort after the executions. And people will tell you that were there. It was gruesome because all the bodies were cut in two. But they used heavy machine guns in them at almost this distance. So there's a lot of cleaning up. They brought the fire engines up there to wash the blood away. So a lot of people saw, and a lot of people know what happened. So them pretending that they were not involved and they were not party to it is a bit much.
Do you know what happened, what was done with the bodies, if any requests were made for the return of the bodies to the families?
That was done on the Thursday, I understand. I spoke to Pat McLeish, who was the commissioner of police at the time, and who had pulled together a group of people who had a meeting with Austin to ask Austin for the bodies. And he had agreed initially. That's on the Thursday, the 20th. But then came back to them on the following day and said he would not give them the bodies until 2 years after.
Why not? Did he give a reason?
No. He had agreed, first of all, to give them the bodies in sealed coffins, because he claimed that the bodies were mutilated.
Yeah, so nobody really has formally seen the bodies of anybody. Do you think there should be a memorial for those who died on October 19th?
Yeah, why not? I don't see. They're Grenadians' lives. As I said, one should never be just looking at things just from the standpoint of whether they were right or wrong. The fact is, they thought they were doing something in defense of their country. And let's accept their sacrifices in that context. And if everything we do is based on whether we accept it as our position or not, then we won't have much to celebrate.
Our struggle was always for the airport to be named after him. And so one of the things that you would say on the platform is that, yes, they have named the highway after Bishop, but we know that one day that Maurice Bishop Highway will lead to the Maurice Bishop International Airport. And at long last, after so many years of struggle, last year it was renamed the Maurice Bishop International Airport.
I say thank you for recognizing and honoring Maurice Bishop by naming our airport the Maurice Bishop International Airport. I vividly remember Daddy's excitement as he looked at the initial drawings of this place where we're standing today. But even though he had the vision, this airport would not exist without the dedicated efforts of many others. We thank our Cuban brothers and sisters who work tirelessly side by side with us. We are deeply and eternally grateful to the government and people of Cuba. We know all that you sacrificed for us. Thank you.
What was your opinion about naming the highway and naming the airport after Maurice Bishop?
I think there are people, not only Maurice Bishop, there are other people who made a lot of contribution to the development of the country, and we have overlooked them, we have not given them their due. Gary had his weaknesses, like Bishop, and some of the things he did, but he was the first revolutionary in the country, and I don't think we have honored him sufficiently. And I think, I certainly hope one day we'll do that. So Bishop has been honored, probably sufficiently, but I think others should also be honored, likewise.
The authorities are being called upon to declare October the 19th as a national holiday and as a day of prayer and reflection because of its transcendental importance in our history. This day should not be another day as usual or a day that people should ever forget. Its historical importance can never be understated and can never be properly observed if it is treated as just an ordinary day.
Some people feel there should be a public holiday on October the 19th. In Grenada right now they have the holiday on the 25th. What's your view on this?
Well, no, I've always expressed my view on this. The 19th of October is the darkest day in our history. There's absolutely nothing to celebrate on that day. That is a day we have to remember. On the contrary, on the 25th we were liberated. It is from the 25th of October we start building back the democratic system and to restore institutions and to get where we are today. So there is something to celebrate from the 25th. There's absolutely nothing to celebrate what happened on October 19th.
But shouldn't there be at least a memorial for those who died on the 19th?
Precisely, I mean, there should be, and I totally support that. Well, on the 19th, they usually have some different memorial activities. So it's a day we have to remember. We cannot forget that day.
These martyrs died in good faith. If rage sometimes twisted their faces and made their voices harsh, we must remember that they lived their revolution in an environment of increasing hostility. They tried to the very end, to their fatal end, to lay the foundations of friendliness with their neighbors. And they were not allowed to be friendly. And so we send them this message of commitment and love from the Guyanese poet Martin Carter. Dear comrades, if it must be, you speak no more with me, nor smile no more with me, nor march no more with me, then let me take a patience and a calm. For even now the greener leaf explodes, sun brightens stone, and all the river burns. Now, from the morning vanguard moving on, dear comrades, I salute you and I say, death will not find us thinking that we die. Thank you.
Last words matter when survival of humanity, when rights of minorities, when treaties theories of revolution, when theories of freedom live and die on the lips of men.
Last words matter. Last words matter when they seal the visions of men. The masses of the world matter.
Shoulder, humps. Stand up, kiss.
October represents the consolidation of the Grenada Revolution, when the masses came out in their numbers to demonstrate their support for their leader as no other time in history. October reminds us of the hatred and bitterness of a group of people who, in the face of this overwhelming support for the leader, were not prepared to respect the wishes of the people. In closing, we say, long live the spirit and memory of Maurice Bishop and October 19 martyrs. Long live the bonds of friendship between the Cuban people and the Grenadian people. Long live the Grenadian people. Let us go forward on our feet and never on our knees. Thank you very much.
October 19th, 1983. What a bloody day. On the fort, guns spray, bullets fly, blood spill, running down the hill, jumping over the wall, breaking bones on each other as we fell and scrambled to save the life of the revolution. That revolution that started the day we were taken from our ancient homelands, when we resisted the plantations and burned them down with Fedon, when we tried emancipation, tried independence, tried to determine our own vision, destination, tried to keep our land from horrorism, tried to eat what we grow and attach idle hands to idle lands, to process and package and sell fruit nectar, to organize our women, youths, zonal councils and farming cooperatives, home repair program, community organizations, national budget discussions and informed consciousness of children, free milk, free books, continuing education, continuing recreation, taking a global stand against oppression and destruction of human minds, hopes and dreams. 4.5 years. Until one mistake, thinking that we could solve this ancient problem with weapons, thinking that we could solve the chaos with violence, forgetting that until the swords of NATO and the UN turn to plows that shares the food of the world free to all, this calamity will not be resolved. So we shut off our heads, we bled, and the revolution sacrificed for the ideals of free food, free medical care, free education, free housing, free employment, free Grenada. May the dream and work of freedom and peace and love continue. Long live equality and human rights. Long live truth and justice. Long live the peaceful and freedom-loving people of the world. Forward ever, onward ever, forward ever, onward ever, forward ever, onward ever.
It's the end of a very long struggle that began since 1983 for them, for me since the year 2000. I think that at the end of the day, no one can properly say that justice has not been served. These men have spent over 23 years incarcerated, which is equivalent to 30 prison years. There were several legal battles, and at the end of the day, the rule of law was observed. My clients, Messrs. Andy Mitchell, Vincent Joseph, and Cosmos Richardson, expressed their relief and happiness on being released from prison. They expressed their deep sorrow over the tragic events of October 1983.
From day one, I said I was innocent about these charges and I will maintain my innocence. You know, so I don't anticipate any hostility, anything like that.
I think it's both appropriate. It has some measure of compassion with it because we all know that the former General Austin isn't well. He's not enjoying the best of health. Likewise, Mr. Ventu and also Mr. McBarnett.
Come back, everybody, come back. Come back, come back.
Just happy to be out and to get home to my family and to straighten out some things, you know.
Like what?
Like the complete rebuilding of my home from since Ivan, and I think it's complete yet, things like that.
You look pretty well, I must admit. You look well.
Okay, thank
well, I'm an old man now.
Actually, okay, to give a comment, some people say, you know, they need apologies to other people, you know, who may have felt offended by, you know, what took place. Anything in particular you'd like to say?
Well, everybody been asking for apologies, and nobody seemed to be wanting to give us any. You see?
25 years,
9 months.
1 month,
1 month.
and 19 days.
How does it feel?
It has been an experience. It's something that I'll tell you, I won't trade for anything, despite all the hardship and all the roughness. It's an experience that has changed me, has changed my life.
I was very bitter, very angry with these guys. But some years after, I started meeting them at the dentist, at the hospital, at the eye clinic. And, you know, I became a Christian then. And the Lord I will get the impression, go to this person and say hi. And I went up to them and say, hi, how you doing, whatnot. It was hard for me, but it was also the healing process for me to be able to forgive them. So I met Christopher Stroud, Cecil Prime, all the other guys. I went up to them and we spoke. Ewart Lane sent an invitation for me and my family to visit him at prison. I went and visited them. And all these guys could have told me they were sorry and they take responsibility for what happened. But up to now, not one of them has told me why they did what they did, who did it, and why my father. Why did they have to kill him?
What would you like to say to the families of the people who died that day?
Well, you know, we sincerely regret what happened. I mean, what happened on the 19th day should not have happened. It's a lot of years that passed, and I know there's a lot of hurt. I passing where I stay, and I'm passing by one of the mothers whose son died, and I pass by the house almost every day. And I don't know how she feels. I mean, you know, how, you know, even all those years, she don't say anything, and I pass and that kind of thing. You know, so on a personal level, my action has led to a lot of pain, and a lot of, you know, people hurt over a lot of years. Right, the whole process, the whole revolution that we were trying to build, you know, crumbled.
My view is whenever we go into reconciliation and to forgiveness, and whenever we're looking at forgiving people, they must have remorse. There must be remorse, and there must be a general atmosphere for this. I'm not so sure if that was available at the time. That is the issue more than anything else. So it's not a question of whether they should be pardoned or not pardoned. I think it's whether they genuinely are remorseful of the actions they're taking.
And you have apologized to the people who have been hurt by the revolution
Absolutely.
and all that
Many
transpired?
times, publicly and privately. I'm aware that while we have had considerable reconciliation with many family members of those who lost loved ones, and I want to stress, among both the civilians and soldiers.
Nevertheless, I was about to ask you.
Nevertheless, there are many, there are some families still that are not able to reconcile, that are still bitter, that are still angry, and I understand that. I understand their pain, I understand their suffering, I understand that they cannot make that step. That is normal, that is human, that is natural.
There's a lot of pain and anger and hurt. And some people have never spoken. So now they're coming out little by little.
Were you guilty?
No, uncategorically no.
So you spent
25 plus years.
You say for a crime you didn't commit?
For a crime I did not commit.
What has happened, like when you bounce into Cornwall or Strawn? I mean,
I have nothing to say to them. I passed Cornwall and Strawn on the road like if I never knew them. Maybe I'm maybe one of those people who wasn't totally reconciled with the fact that these people should be free, and I keep as far away as possible from them, and vice versa, because they know how I feel about them, and so they keep far away from me too, and I like that.
I always speak to Mr. Code and others and said, I have forgiven. I have no conditions attached. But for the families who have not reached that juncture at that time, I said to them, we need to work together to bring about true reconciliation and healing.
Other people in the region see free health care. They see free education. They see unemployment disappearing. Unemployment from 49% has come down to under 12%. They understand that the people are excited about the new popular democratic structures that we are building. These things are matters of tremendous concern to this American administration, and it is really that example that they are afraid of. This new experiment, this new civilization that we are constructing right here in this small country, peopled by brave, heroic people who are willing to build their own country in their own way.
People liked Bishop, in my opinion, as an individual. People were drawn to him. I don't know that people were into the system or what they were trying to bring to Grenada. People liked Bishop. He was tall, he was handsome, he was, very eloquent, a good speaker. I don't know that people really supported what was actually happening per se, and that's my opinion.
We have to understand more fundamentally the errors. The way we took power by armed struggle. We did not hold elections right away. That was the second major mistake, because it meant that we didn't have a system with checks and balances. You must have opposition parties that are powerful and that are free to operate. When you lack checks and balances, all sorts of excess takes place, and you see a pattern. Whenever there's a problem, the solution to the problem is one of use of force. Throughout, from day one, we were lacking in tolerance. We were lacking in maturity. We were inexperienced. And that combination of immaturity, inexperience, and intolerance was a deadly combination.
Yeah, brother Maurice Bishop, working class champion, is gone. Amen, amen, amen. Because of the pains you felt, a nation was born. Now Grenada mourns your lost brave son.
I still sometimes I see his car on the road and I still find myself looking in for him and that sort of thing, you know. But I know he's really dead, but it's even harder to face up because, you know, we weren't able to bury him, so there's no grave or anything that you can say, or you can put some flowers or anything. So I think that makes it even harder to really believe that it's happened, you know.
We always say of Bishop that his greatest strength was his greatest weakness. He was just an extraordinary honest man. And he was such an upright, honest man that he never at one moment thought that his closest friends were going to any way affect him. And he could have fight any invading, any outside power and influence, but he just couldn't fight his friends around him.
It is really just very fortunate for us that our young revolution was able to bring this dream into reality. It really does represent, in our opinion, a gateway to the future.
Grenadians in the region could no longer talk revolution because of Bernard Codd and Hudson Austin, the warlord, they turn a dream.
I returned to Grenada 30 years after the killings to show a rough edit of the film to those who appeared in it, to ensure that they would not be misrepresented. The screenings evoked tears and sadness, and some anger that ideological differences between brothers and sisters would result in the guns being turned on the people. Hopefully this film will lead to a greater understanding of what happened during the revolution and will, in some way, contribute to healing and reconciliation.
They orchestrated a crucifixion that led to a Yankee invasion, betrayed the nation and turned back the revolution. Because of your greed for power, Austin and Pod, all you commit murder. But you made your biggest mistake with 120,000 lives at stake. Like all you started Third World War and brought a colonial disaster on an oppressed people forwarding out of that struggle.